What's up, plant lovers? Devin is here, and today we're going to be talking about growing succulents successfully inside our homes. Now, we're going to be focused on some of the cool, richly colored succulents that we really love and adore, and most of us have a lot of trouble actually keeping them alive and colorful inside the home. So we're not going to be talking about things like jade or Christmas cactus, which I have separate videos for, but rather some of the rosette forming succulents that showcase very brilliant blues, purples, sometimes even reds and yellows when they are growing successfully. Now, as we know, succulents are plants that have thick, fleshy leaves that store water. Over time, they have adapted to the conditions where they're native to withstand very long periods of time without any rainfall. As such, they're some of the most unique plants in the plant kingdom. Now, because these succulents have adapted themselves to such unique growing conditions out in nature, it can be a little bit challenging to try and replicate those conditions inside our homes. So in this video, I'm going to outline exactly what I do to try to replicate those conditions as best as I can, which will allow them to produce the most colorful foliage possible. We're also going to be talking about how to propagate them through the fun decapitation method, which if you've never done before, hopefully this video will instill the confidence you need to go through. Now, before we get started, two of my favorite places to actually buy succulents online, my favorite spot is a website called The Next Gardener. That's where I got all of these beautiful succulents from. Or in person, I actually like to just go to Home Depot. Home Depot, while I don't buy many plants there, they often have a wide selection of succulents at very reasonable prices. So a few of the different kinds of succulents that I'll be referencing here in this video include things like Echeveria, Kalanchoe, Sedum, Crassula, Pachyphytum, Graptopetalum, and maybe a couple others. All right, so how do we grow our succulents successfully? Well, the first place to start is creating the right soil mix for our succulents. These succulents hail from deserty areas with very dry, arid soils that has very sharp drainage. So we want to create a soil mix that also has incredible drainage where moisture never retains for long periods of time. So my go-to blend that's very easy to make is a 50-50 blend of traditional bagged potting mix mixed with 50% perlite. That creates a really nice, light, airy, fluffy soil mix that when you water, your plants will absorb the moisture that they want and all of the excess moisture will then fall through. All right, so now that we have the right soil mix, then we have to choose the right containers. The first thing that you must include are pots that have drainage holes. Our succulents need excellent drainage, and a pot without drainage holes is not going to create a healthy, happy succulent. Then we can decide what kind of container. I often will opt for terracotta or small plastic containers. I like terracotta because they have the ability to breathe through the sides of the containers, allowing for improved airflow and thus better drainage. I also like small plastic containers because they tend to dry out the quickest, and that's something that our succulents like. But even more important is choosing the right size of the container. We want to choose a container that really allows us to just barely stuff those succulents into the pot without leaving much extra space in your container for excess soil that doesn't have any roots growing in it. It's essential that our succulents fill out their containers with their roots as quickly as possible. So starting with small pots and then gradually building our way up as their plants grow and produce little pups is the best way to go about choosing the right size. We never want to place a succulent in a large pot where it's swimming in tons of soil. As you can see here, all of my succulents are pretty much overflowing out of the edges of the containers. The next aspect that we need to think about is lighting. If you want to have the bright, brilliant colors, you need to have the best lighting possible. That's why I grow all of my succulents under my mother LED light, which is the best lighting that I have in my houseplant jungle. These will not create that wonderful color if they have suboptimal lighting. However, if you don't have the opportunity to invest in a great high quality LED light right now, then you need to place it by a very, very sunny window. Southern or western exposure for those of us in the northern hemisphere is essential. Next, we need to think about watering. So when it comes to watering the succulents, many of us have the misconception that succulents never need water. And while they do store water in their foliage and have the ability to go long periods of time without water, they definitely still need to be watered, and they do like to be watered in quite specific forms. If you do have yours growing under a wonderful LED light like I do, then you're gonna water your plants about 1 every 10 days while they're inside your home. Because you're giving them sufficient lighting, you can water them regularly and you will promote even growth around your plant, and you'll see your plant thriving while inside your home. However, if you have your plant simply by a sunny window, you're going to water less. Because your plants will be receiving less lighting, that means they need less water. As we remember from my previous videos, that combination of container size with lighting and temperature are the 3 factors that go into determining how often you should be watering your plants. If you give your succulents too much water without enough lighting, there's 2 things that can occur. Number 1, they can rot, turn mushy, and die. Or they can start to grow, but they will produce very uneven growth, often creating a sort of stretched out look, which is not a horrible thing, but it's oftentimes not exactly what we want. Now, when we are watering, I do like to use one of these cool little squirt bottles. You can find a link for this in the description below, and I find these to be very useful because it allows me to go around the entire succulent, providing water to the roots all the way around the plant. That is going to be essential to creating a wonderful, happy houseplant. If you're using a traditional watering pan, many times water will stand still on top of that foliage, creating rot over the course of a few days. So we want to avoid that as much as possible, and that's why I like to water with these guys. Now, while we're growing our succulents inside, I really never give them a deep watering. Instead, I give them just enough water to wet the roots around them, and then I allow them to dry off for about 7 to 10 days before watering them again. I always find that watering less is better than watering more. Whenever I've watered too much, I always find that some rot has occurred over the next few days. Now, in terms of fertilizing, you can fertilize your succulents maybe once every 3 months or so. It's something that I rarely do, but it's not a bad practice. It's not harmful for your plants if you do fertilize them once every quarter or so. Okay, now on to the very most important part of growing succulents. We need to place them outside while our weather is warm. So I'm growing my plants here in Zone 6B in eastern Pennsylvania. So for me, whenever the weather is above 45 degrees consistently through the nights, I leave my succulents outside. That truly is the kicker. If you want to grow your succulents happily inside your home in the cold winter, fall, early spring months, you need to place them outside while the weather is warm. And while the weather is warm, you really want to give them as much sun as possible. It's so important. They like to absorb all of the sunshine that they can, and that's going to keep them strong over the course of the winter time when you do have them inside. Now, when you're ready to place them outside, it's important that you gradually introduce them to the sunlight. Yes, they do love to be in that full sun, but only after they've had about a week of acclimating themselves to a little bit more sunlight, a little bit more sunlight, a little bit more sunlight. So when you first place them outside, I always put mine in a totally shaded, covered area, and then I will give them maybe 1 hour of morning sunlight, then 2 hours, then 3 hours, then 5 hours, then leave them out in the full sun for all day long. That will keep your succulents from getting burnt, which, even though they are sun-loving plants, they will definitely get burnt if you put them in too much sun too quickly. Now, during those warm summer months, I don't use these guys. I will just use a hose and I will give them deep watering. Absolutely. That is assuming that your succulents are growing fully inside of their containers. If your plants are still nice and baby plants in a container like this, then yeah, go ahead and use one of these guys so that you don't provide too much water before they've had a chance to really establish their root system. Also, along that note, when they are outside and they are still baby plants, you don't want to place them in an area where they're going to get too much rainfall. That it can definitely cause baby succulents to rot out. But I've had this guy for a couple years, so at this point, I can put him outside in the full sun under any conditions, any summer storms, it's gonna handle with ease. So you don't have to worry once your plants are nice and established like this. All right, so now that you've been growing your succulents for a while, they're beautiful, they're growing nice and tall and big and maybe a little bit top heavy and kind of overflowing out of the plants. How do you propagate this? How do you cut it back so that you can get 2 plants from the 1? All right, so the first thing that you want to do, of course, you got to get some sharp shears. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to locate where those lowermost leaves are, and we're going to just chop. Chop it off, baby. Now, with this guy, what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the lowermost leaves. So now I have a nice, good 2-inch stem. I like to have like a good amount of space because eventually we will plant this back in, and I like to be able to have enough of a stem so that it can really hold the top rosettes up. Now for the moment, what I'm gonna do, because succulents have so much moisture in their stems and leaves, I'm gonna let this sit out just like this for maybe 5 days or so and allow it to callus over. You can see how it looks now. And I'll show you what it looks like once it's calloused over. And then it'll be ready to plant back up. All right, so now what we're gonna do with these leaves is I have a nice little dish tray, terracotta. I filled it with our 50% potting mix perlite combo. Then I have some just water in a little sprayer, and I'm just gonna gently spray the top. You can see it's just a little evenly moist. Now I'm gonna take these leaves and rounded side down, I'm just going to gently place them around like so. I'm just gently pushing in where these leaves met the stem so that that is nice and touching, just barely. Now I'm just going to place this with where all of my succulents are growing happily, and we'll revisit it shortly once we see something happening. There you go, you can see it is calloused over nicely. Now all we need to do is we will take our 50-50 perlite potting mix combo, fill up a nice little 3-inch container. I'll pre-moisten this soil. Just make sure you let all of the excess moisture flow out. Then I have my little chopstick. I'll just make a hole right in the middle, all the way down to the bottom of my container. And then I'll actually go ahead and remove maybe a couple more of these lower leaves. Take my succulent, and you want to position it so that none of the leaves are touching the soil. So you can see that there is definitely some clearance between the top of the soil line and any of those leaves. Now from here, I'm just gonna go add this back to my collection with all of my other happily growing succulents, and we just made a second plant. So easy as that. All right, so the decapitated Echeveria lolita has been growing. So now I just wanna show you guys how to get it transplanted. I'm gonna add it to this little, pot over here of succulents. Obviously we're outside now, we're in the middle of May time, so while this video is about growing our succulents indoors, part of growing them indoors successfully involves taking them outside when the weather is in the summertime in your region. So first thing I'll do, make a nice little section for this. I always like to use chopsticks, they're really nice when we're dealing with succulents. I'm gonna pour some of this soil out. Make some space. And let's see what we got going on. Hey, that's pretty good root material for like 2.5 months, I would say. So now, all right, so that looks like a nice little pocket for this guy to go into. And you just kind of have to jam it in there and try not to break anything along the way. And give it some water. Well, that looks pretty good. Now this corner of the pot is absolutely nice and full, and the plant lives on. All right, so what I've been doing like every other day or whenever I think about it is just taking my little spray bottle and moistening them down. And over time, what has happened is that they've started to create beautiful little roots, as you can see right here and here and here. This gorgeous little section of roots right here. And over a few months after creating those roots, they will eventually start to create brand new baby succulents like you can see right here. Now it's been about 3 months and this is the first guy to create any new growth. And then once your plant has started to create these new succulents like this, what you will do is you'll take some nice sharp scissors or shears and you'll actually just cut that old leaf off, because this little guy is not going to do any new growth. Now we have this brand new succulent that's just starting, and so we'll just plant this in and allow it to continue to do its thing. Meanwhile, we'll continue to spray all of these leaves every other day or so until they've created their own new succulents, and then we'll cut away that old leaf material as needed when the time is right. Well, so with that, now you know how to grow your succulents successfully inside, helping them to retain that beautiful color indoors, as well as how to propagate them via that decapitation method and through single leaf propagation. If you do have any other further questions or comments, make sure to leave them below. Other experiences that you'd like to share with the rest of the plant community, also please leave those below. We are a growing community, and the best way for us to grow as a community is to share our ideas and experiences amongst one another. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a little like and subscribe to our channel. We're bringing new plant-related content every single week. Anyways, thank you guys for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I'll catch you soon. Ciao.